I would like to begin this video with a land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron, Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Nothing I say is necessarily directly affiliated with the University of Toronto. I'm just using the land acknowledgement from my school. Thank you. So to get started, when you're preparing to prepare for medical school interviews, you want to understand what is the point of these interviews in the first place? What are the interviewers looking for? And so med school interviewers are looking for a couple different things. Number one, value alignment. So remember, they've already seen that you're smart. So they know your MCAT score, they know your grades. Right now, they're trying to see, are you a good fit for this school? So they're looking at your professionalism, your ethics, and your respect as you're answering these questions. So that's number one. Number two is communication. So are you clear? Are you structured? And are you able to show empathy throughout your questions? Now, I might have been good at maybe one and a half of these. I know I'm an empathetic person, but in terms of structure and clarity, that was really tricky for me, especially in the very beginning. And it still is for me. If you watch some of my other videos, I definitely struggle with using filler words like, you know, and I'm sure I had a couple of those thrown in as I was doing these interviews, just because as you get nervous, as you relax a bit, these things will come up naturally. But you could definitely overcome them with a lot of preparation and practice. Having a structure before you're going into these interviews or even just practicing will help you to get rid of those fillers and give you a great structure and flow. So these things can be overcome with some practice. Number three, schools are looking for insight and growth. So they want to know that you're able to reflect on your past experiences and talk about the lessons you've learned and how you're going to bring that into medical school and maybe later on into medicine. So it's really important that you've already, you have some stories in your back pocket and that you could talk to the growth that you've shown in those experiences. And so the next thing that you're going to want to do is gather information. You're going to be gathering information from a couple different resources, I'm sure. But the first thing that I wanted to mention are just the 4 basic ethical principles that you're going to find on just in various areas. And so these are the things that are going to be guiding the way we practice medicine. And so the 4 ethical principles include autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice. So those are the 4 main ethical principles. And so you're going to bring these up, especially when you're doing ethical dilemma type questions. And so I'll talk about that. And so moving forward, as far as Canadians go, after those ethical principles, the most important thing that you want to be familiar with are the CANMEDS roles. So the ethical principles are things that guide our practice, and the CANMED roles are the things that we want to embody. So these are the things that we want to show that we can show as medical students and as doctors in the future. And they include things like being a leader, being a good communicator, somebody who's able to collaborate. So these are all the roles that they're looking for in a potential Canadian medical student. So you need to make sure that you are familiar with those before you even start practicing for your interview questions. And you'll find that at the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. And all of these links, of course, will be in that big document that I end up putting in the community tab. And then following that, you're going to want to be familiar with the Canadian Medical Association Code of Ethics. Again, that's just going to be some principles that can guide our behavior. And then more specifically, even though you want to be general and understand ethics from like all different types of from all doctors in Canada. You want to also look at the provincial regulatory colleges. So in Ontario, that would be the CPSO, so the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, just because every province is going to differ a little bit in their practice guidelines. And so you want to be familiar with that when you're answering questions. For instance, is there an age of consent in the province that you're interviewing at? What are their current views on injection sites, and what are the practices around that? It's not a mandatory thing to know that before you go into medical school, but I think it's a plus if you can show that you're staying up to date on those kind of things. Another way that you're going to be able to stay up to date on those kind of topics is through podcasts. So these are really helpful and a passive way of being able to gain some knowledge on current topics that are going on. And two podcasts that I would recommend that I was listening to as I was preparing for medical school interviews. Number one is White Coat Black Art, and that just goes over Canadian health culture and ethics, and it's really entertaining to listen to as well. And then number two would be the CBC, The Dose, and those are like really short episodes, so at least they're like really short. You don't have to listen for a very long time, and they go over like current health issues. So it's great for current policies and current events. I've really enjoyed listening. Sometimes I'd even listen to this when I was running on the treadmill, so I'd recommend both of these. Finally, in terms of gathering information, you're going to want to look at the school website. So whatever school you are applying to, go to their website and have an idea of what are their main values and what is their mission statements. And even for yourself, you want to know, does that school really align with me? Now, I know in Canada, it's kind of hard for you as an interviewer to be choosy about whether or not the school aligns with you, just because there's not a lot of schools to choose from and you're fortunate enough to even get an interview. But you still want to know, am I a good fit? And is this school right for me? So that's really important. Also, wink, wink, you're going to want to be familiar with certain schools that have their own pillars. And so even though we have the main pillars of ethical principles and we have the CANMEDS roles, some schools, wink, wink, have their own pillars that they want you to include when you're answering their personal statements, and then some things that they want you to include in their when you're answering questions for the interview. So I would be very familiar if there are certain schools that have pillars. Wink, wink. Okay, and then in terms of things that you need to have on your own part. So already I've talked about things that you want to gather from outside resources. You also want to build up your own little resource table of events or experiences that you've had in your own life. And within this table, you're going to have one column that states the situation, another column talking about values that you demonstrated, another that talks about what you did well in this situation. So you could talk about yourself positively. Another column, again, to talk about what you would improve to show that you are reflecting on that situation. And then a final column to show how you've grown since. And when you have this table of all these different experiences, it's going to help you in all the different questions that are presented to you, just because you won't have to sit there and think about a different situation that applies to that question, or you won't have to make one up, which is even worse. You'll be able to be genuine and you'll be well prepared to answer every question when you have this table. Trust me, it's super helpful. And you can use them to, again, go transfer over to different situations. Next, you're going to want to practice with peers. And so I'm of two minds with this in terms of using something like a Reddit. However, I will say, as somebody who was applying as a mature student, I wasn't in the know with what to know and what to do when applying to medical school. And so going on Reddit really helped me with knowing what I should be doing and what I should be focusing on, especially in interviews. And it was a good way to find peers to interview with as well. And the reason I'm saying I'm of two minds with this is just because it can be difficult to interview with people while not taking ideas from them, you know what I mean, or trying to model your interview styles around what their interview style is, just because none of us really know what the interviewers are looking for, and you don't want to fall into the trap of trying to model yourself after a certain peer. However, it can still really strengthen your own interview skills to work with different people and just to see variety in how questions can be answered. So I'm of two minds with that, but I would still recommend interviewing with your peers. And finally, of course, a mentor. So, in addition to practicing with peers, you're going to need a mentor. And I would say, like, one specific mentor that can see your progression. That way, they can comment on your strengths and areas of weakness, and really give you advice to build up your interview skills leading up to your interview day. So, you wouldn't be practicing, of course, with this person every day just because they're going to be super busy. But even if they could see you once every 2 weeks leading up to your interview, that'll help you so much because they've already done this. They don't have, the answers that will for sure get you into medical school, but they've already been successful in this. So why not use their tips to help you get ahead?
So before I end the video, I did want to go over different styles of interviews and how that's going to affect your interview preparation. So I'll go over this again when I have the video on logistics, but just so you're keeping in mind, there's different formats for interviews. There can be in person and there can be virtual. And you need to practice based on the type of interview that the school conducts. So, for instance, if your interview is virtual, then it's perfect to be practicing over Zoom. And if it's asynchronous, meaning you're not going to have somebody in front of you throughout that interview, it's important that you're recording yourself and practicing by yourself. This is important both if it's asynchronous and also to get an idea of what you look like in front of the camera. For instance, I've talked in length about the fact that I have a lot of filler words and that kind of thing. You're going to have a lot of quirks that you don't notice that you do. And once you record yourself, you'll be able to figure out how to correct those quirks. So it's not going to be perfect. Like I still use filler words and all that, but it's important for you to see yourself. Even though it can be really cringy at first, I would really recommend doing that. Also, this is also pertaining to logistics. Keep in mind that you may not always have access to a paper, meaning in some schools you're going to be able to take notes and use those notes throughout your interview, whereas at other schools you may be able to take notes but not use them in the interview, and then there might be situations where you can't write down anything at all. So these are all really important to keep in mind as you're preparing for your interview. So, as I was watching back to edit this video, I realized that I've shared quite a bit of information throughout this video. And if this is your first video as you're preparing for your interview, I do not want to scare you at all. So, I realized that I introduced different things such as the Royal College, um, different kind of podcasts to get information about current events and everything like that. But just like one of my colleagues said in the first video, you're not going to have to be an expert on any of these at all. And I'll get into more detail about that, especially when I'm talking about um, questions such as policy questions. But you're not meant to be an expert in any type of policy that's going on right now in medicine. But having some knowledge does make you stand out a bit. For instance, just having maybe one one type of number that you can pull out for a certain thing, such as knowing, like, I don't know, a certain amount of people are homeless would be helpful. But in general, you do not need to know or need to be an expert on anything. Some of these questions are even going to be extremely like obscure. They might ask you, I don't know, about the importance of Legos in movies, something really obscure. So, just again, the only thing you need to be an expert on is your own experiences. Otherwise, do not stress about being an expert on any of these topics at all. They are trying to get to know you and how you think, not testing you on what you already know. So, best of luck, and that is pretty much the end of this video.
So that is it for the preparing to prepare stage. And next, I'll go on to talking about the individual frameworks and question types. So see you later.